Imagine waking up at 3 in the morning with your heart racing, not because of a nightmare, but because your mind won't stop calculating financial disasters. Your car making that weird noise, your laptop showing signs of age, the possibility of losing your job, emergency vet bills. These thoughts spiral endlessly in the darkness, each scenario more catastrophic than the last. This restless anxiety isn't just about money, it's about control, security, and your ability to handle whatever life throws at you tomorrow. My name is Tim, and I help people understand money, personal finance, and building wealth. If you're interested in getting your finances on track and maybe even getting ahead of the pack, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if this information helps you out. Now picture this same scenario, but with one crucial difference. You've got $10,000 sitting quietly in your savings account. Same potential problems, same uncertainties, but suddenly your breathing is deeper. Your shoulders aren't tensed. The spinning thoughts slow to a manageable pace. Tim calls this the 10K switch, that strange moment where nothing outside really changed, but somehow your entire nervous system did. This isn't coincidence or wishful thinking. There's genuine science behind why this specific amount of money creates such a dramatic shift in how you experience daily life. Most people dismiss financial milestones as meaningless targets invented by wealthy individuals to make everyone else feel inadequate. But $10,000 isn't arbitrary. It represents a psychological and practical threshold that fundamentally changes your relationship with money, risk, and opportunity. This number isn't about becoming rich or buying luxury items. It's about transitioning from survival mode to growth mode, from constant defensive decisions to proactive choices about your future. Think about your current relationship with money decisions. Every purchase requires mental calculation. You're standing in the grocery aisle weighing whether name brand cereal is worth the extra $2 or if the generic cardboard flavored alternative is your reality for the month. Friends suggest dinner at a restaurant, and you manufacture excuses because admitting that $25 would derail your weekly budget feels too vulnerable. These aren't isolated incidents, they're the constant background hum of financial stress that millions experience daily. This perpetual state of financial vigilance is exhausting. Every unexpected expense feels potentially devastating. Every financial choice demands careful consideration because there's no buffer, no margin for error. You're constantly playing defense with your money instead of making strategic decisions about building a better future. That defensive mindset keeps you trapped in short-term thinking, always reacting to immediate needs rather than planning for long-term goals. The transformation that occurs when you accumulate your first $10,000 is profound. It's not about suddenly being able to afford expensive toys or changing your lifestyle overnight. Most people who reach this milestone still drive the same car, live in the same place, and shop in the same stores. The real change happens in your nervous system, your decision-making, and your fundamental relationship with uncertainty. Your relationship with risk undergoes a complete shift. When you have no financial cushion, every decision feels potentially dangerous. Considering a career change, relocating to a different city, or even planning a vacation becomes a source of stress because, one miscalculation could leave you financially wrecked. The absence of savings makes every choice feel like a high-stakes gamble with your basic security. With $10,000 as your foundation, those same decisions move from terrifying to manageable. You're not suddenly going to quit your job to become a professional street performer, but you might finally gather the courage to request that promotion you've been thinking about for months. You might actually pay for a certification, a course, or a skill that could increase your earning potential. A real safety net doesn't encourage recklessness. It gives you permission to think beyond just surviving the next 2 weeks. There's fascinating neurological research about what happens when you see a 5-figure balance in your account for the first time. Financial security reduces cortisol production, your body's primary stress hormone. That means reaching $10,000 doesn't just improve your bank balance, it literally changes how your body responds to everyday problems. Think about the last time you experienced a minor automotive problem. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, that check engine light might as well be a countdown timer to financial catastrophe. You immediately start worrying about repair costs, whether you'll need to use credit cards, or if you'll have to borrow money from family. The stress response is instant and intense because this unexpected expense threatens your basic stability. With $10,000 saved, that same check engine light becomes a simple inconvenience. You're annoyed, sure, but you're not panicked. That shift from panic to irritation might seem small, but it creates ripple effects throughout your life. When you're not constantly worried about money, you make better decisions, you sleep more soundly, perform more effectively at work, and have more patience with the people around you. Financial stress touches almost every aspect of human behavior, and removing that pressure unlocks mental energy you can redirect toward actually improving your circumstances. The surprising part is that most of the benefits of $10,000 don't come from spending it. They come from knowing it's there. That's the emergency fund effect. An emergency fund isn't primarily about emergencies, it's about the peace of mind that comes from knowing you can handle them. Most people who accumulate $10,000 in savings don't burn through it on crises. In reality, they use that position to make better moves. They invest in education, start small businesses, relocate to areas with better opportunities, or simply free up their mind long enough to focus on increasing their income instead of constantly patching holes. There's also a confidence factor that's difficult to measure but impossible to ignore. When you know you have money available, you carry yourself differently. You negotiate more effectively. You're more willing to walk away from unfair situations because desperation isn't driving your decisions anymore. That quiet confidence often leads to better job offers, healthier relationships, and better outcomes in general. Now, if you're currently struggling to save even $100 a month, $10,000 might sound impossibly far away. Human psychology shows something important here. The hardest part isn't actually saving the money. The hardest part is becoming the kind of person who saves money. Most people treat saving like a temporary diet. They cut expenses dramatically for a few months, save aggressively, then burn out and fall back into old patterns. The people who actually reach 10,000 don't see it as a phase, they see it as an identity shift. They become the kind of person who always pays themselves first, even if it's a small amount. When you see yourself as someone who saves money, you start noticing opportunities to cut unnecessary costs that used to slip by unnoticed. You become more creative about earning a little extra. You start thinking in years instead of weekends. And the beautiful part is, it gets easier as you go. Saving your first $1,000 is brutal. It often requires selling stuff, saying no to a lot of things, and changing habits that feel comfortable. Saving your second thousand is still hard, but it's less confusing because you've already done it once. By the time you're working toward your fifth or sixth thousand, the process feels almost automatic. You've built systems and routines around it. $10,000 is powerful because of what it can absorb. For a lot of people, that amount can cover most of the surprise expenses that usually blow up their finances: car repairs, a medical bill, a surprise move, a short period of unemployment. It doesn't make life easy, but it stops ordinary problems from turning into full-scale emergencies. And there's another layer most people miss. $10,000 changes how you think about money itself. Instead of seeing money as something that disappears from your paycheck every month, you start seeing it as a tool that buys options. Before you have savings, money feels scarce and fragile. Every dollar spent feels like it's gone forever. With $10,000 working as your foundation, you start to understand that money can actually create more money. That's when people get genuinely curious about investing, about side businesses, about passive income, not because they suddenly became finance nerds, but because they finally have the mental space to think beyond how do I get through this month. The person with $10,000 saved is much closer to real financial independence than someone with zero savings who earns twice as much. You probably know people who make six figures but are constantly broke. They drive expensive cars, live in impressive apartments, and never seem to have any money left. Meanwhile, someone earning far less quietly accumulates savings because they treat every raise as a chance to save more, not spend more. The difference isn't the size of their paycheck, it's how they think. Reaching $10,000 in savings is like finishing a masterclass in practical money psychology. You learn to separate wants from needs. You learn how to cut spending without feeling like your life is over. You learn how to sit with discomfort now to buy real freedom later. Those are the skills that actually build wealth. So, what can $10,000 do for you in the real world? First, it neutralizes the kind of emergencies that used to keep you up at night. Most car repairs land in the hundreds, not tens of thousands. Most surprise medical visits fall in that range too. It won't pay for a major surgery, but it will cover the majority of sudden, painful bills that ambush people. Job loss becomes survivable instead of catastrophic. $10,000 might pay for 3 to 6 months of expenses in a cheaper area, or 1 to 3 months in a more expensive city. In some places, $10,000 won't come close to half a year of living costs. In others, it might stretch for nearly a year. The exact timeline depends on where you live, but the principle is the same. You've bought time. Time to look for a better job instead of grabbing the first thing that appears. Time to think instead of panic. Here's where a lot of people misunderstand this milestone. $10,000 doesn't just shield you from bad things. It opens doors you couldn't even see before. Maybe you hear about a certification that costs $2,000, but could realistically boost your salary by $5,000 or $10,000 per year. Without savings, that's just a nice idea you can't afford. With $10,000 in the bank, it becomes a calculated risk you can choose to take. Maybe your friend is starting a small business and needs a tiny investor. Without savings, you can only nod and change the subject. With savings, you at least have the option to participate if it makes sense. I'm not telling you to gamble your entire emergency fund on risky ideas. The point is this: having $10,000 doesn't only reduce fear, it creates options. And options are the real currency of financial freedom. Sometimes life will still hit you hard. People do everything right and then watch their $10,000 drop to $2,000 after a string of bad luck, a blown transmission, a medical bill, a family emergency. But here's the difference. If you built that $10,000 once, you know you can do it again. You rebuild from a completely different mental place. Someone saves $10,000, then spends $8,000 in a month on a car and an emergency surgery. They're back at $2,000. But they're not the same person they were the first time their account showed that number. They're calmer, they don't panic, they don't reach for credit cards immediately, they tighten their budget, adjust, and climb again. The money went down, but their skill level stayed high. That's the real benefit. This milestone also reshapes how you show up at work. When you're broke, you're almost handcuffed to your job. Your boss can be unreasonable, your schedule can be insane, and your stress can be through the roof, but you feel stuck. You can't risk upsetting anyone because you need the paycheck more than they need you. With $10,000, you suddenly have what people quietly call walkaway money. You probably won't storm into the office and quit for dramatic effect, but you know deep down that if it really came to it, you could leave and still be okay for a while. That tiny shift changes everything. You ask for the raise you actually deserve instead of talking yourself out of it. You say no to unreasonable demands. You start looking at new opportunities, not from a place of panic, but from a place of curiosity. And here's the funny part. Often, you never need to actually spend your emergency fund. Just knowing it exists changes your posture, your tone, and your confidence so much that your income goes up anyway. There's a pattern you see over and over. Someone grinds for months to build their first $10,000. Within a year of having that buffer, they've either changed jobs, negotiated a better salary, or stepped into higher value work. Not because the money magically made them successful, but because it took enough fear out of the equation for their potential to show up. Of course, there's a trap here. People hit 10,000, feel that new sense of calm, and then reward themselves in a way that quietly destroys the progress. A new car because I deserve it. A vacation because I've been so disciplined. A lifestyle jump that locks them into higher fixed costs. Then the buffer disappears, and so does the peace of mind. $10,000 isn't a trophy, it's infrastructure. It's not the prize for good behavior, it's the platform that lets you build the rest of your financial life. And yes, the world is more expensive than it used to be. 5 or 10 years ago, some parents told their kids, always keep $2,000 in savings. For many people now, that barely covers a single surprise bill. In a lot of places, $10,000 doesn't stretch as far as it used to, but the principle remains the same. You need a number that feels big enough that everyday problems stop feeling like the end of the world. For a huge share of people, that first number is still around 10,000. If 10,000 feels enormous from where you're standing, here's the good news. You don't get there by doing something huge once. You get there by doing something small over and over. Maybe you start with $25 a month, maybe $50. The amount matters less than the consistency and the decision that this is who I am now. You can always scale up later. When people actually sit down and look at their spending, they usually find something uncomfortable. The average person spends thousands per year on coffee, takeout, random convenience buys, and little daily upgrades that don't actually move the needle on happiness. No judgment. Everyone does it. But if you redirect even a fraction of those invisible expenses into savings, 10,000 stops being a fantasy and becomes a 3 to 5 year project. And along that path, something strange happens. You stop thinking of money as this mysterious force that controls your life and start seeing it as a series of clear, boring trade offs. This subscription or that deposit, this impulse purchase, or that step toward 10,000. That's when you realize building wealth isn't about winning the lottery or finding a magic stock. It's about the quiet, unglamorous habit of always paying yourself first. Reaching 10,000 also changes how often you think about money. When you're broke, you think about it constantly, but in a panicked, reactive way. When you've got a real buffer, you think about it less often, but in a more strategic way. You're not debating every $3 coffee. You're asking better questions. Is this apartment worth what it's costing me? Could I get a cheaper car and invest the difference? How fast can I get to the next milestone? Decision fatigue shrinks. You stop running mental math on every snack, every drink, every bus ticket. You don't stare at the gas pump wondering if you can afford to fill the tank all the way. You buy pasta because you like that pasta, not because it's 20 cents cheaper. One person described the first grocery trip after hitting 10,000 as almost emotional, not because they filled the cart with luxury items, but because for the first time, every item they picked up wasn't a tiny emergency. That's the level of quiet freedom most people don't notice they're missing. Let's be clear, $10,000 doesn't make you rich. It doesn't mean you can quit your job, move to the beach, and forget about responsibilities. You'll still think twice before buying a $1,000 gadget you don't really need. You'll still budget. You'll still be careful. What 10,000 really buys you is breathing room, time, options, a calmer brain. Those three ingredients sit underneath every smart financial decision you'll make for the rest of your life. When you're not suffocating under daily money stress, you can finally notice things like your car insurance is absurdly high and you could switch providers. Your phone plan is bloated and you don't use half the features. You're paying for subscriptions you forgot existed. Those adjustments might save $50 or $100 a month. That doesn't sound life-changing, but when you've already built the habit of saving, every extra dollar has a job, and it goes toward the next cushion, the next investment, the next level of security. There's another subtle psychological shift that happens. When you have no savings, every dollar feels like it might be the last one you see for a while. That makes you extremely careful in a way that sometimes backfires. You avoid spending on things that could actually increase your income, like a networking event, a professional tool, or a course, because you're terrified of parting with the money. When you've got 10,000 as a foundation, you're still careful, but not paralyzed. You might look at that $50 event and think, if I meet one person who opens a door for me, this could pay for itself 100 times over. The difference isn't that you suddenly love spending, it's that you can finally distinguish between consumption and investment. And then there's the social side of all this. Money stress doesn't just live in your bank app, it leaks into your friendships, your family, your relationship. When you're constantly worried about bills, you turn down invitations, you avoid trips, you feel guilty saying yes to things that cost anything. Over time, that isolation hurts. $10,000 doesn't mean you start picking up the check for everyone, but it does mean you can say yes to normal, modest social plans without your stomach twisting. You don't have to be the friend who always says, I can't, I'm broke, even when that's the truth. You don't have to lie about why you're staying home. That relief alone changes how connected you feel to other people. In your career, the shift is even more pronounced. When you're not terrified of missing a paycheck, you're more honest, more creative, and more willing to take on responsibility. You're not tiptoeing through your day hoping not to get noticed in case something goes wrong. You're leaning in because you know that even if something did go wrong, it wouldn't destroy you. That's the energy that gets promoted. Mathematically, the path to 10,000 is slower than people want and faster than they think. If you manage to save $277 a month, you'd hit 10,000 in 3 years. That's about $64 a week, roughly $9 a day. $9 a day might sound like a lot when everything feels tight. But when you track your spending for a week, you'll almost always find $9 that quietly evaporates on things you don't really remember. Snacks, delivery fees, late-night scroll purchases. It's only a couple bucks moments. You don't have to cut all of them. You just have to reclaim enough of them consistently. As your savings climb, something else builds alongside the number. Proof. Proof that you can stick to a plan. Proof that you can change your habits. Proof that you're not doomed to repeat whatever money story you grew up with. That proof is fuel. It makes the next financial goal, whether that's 20,000, a debt-free life, or your first investment account, feel less like a fantasy and more like a timeline. People often ask what they should actually do with their first $10,000: chase yield, invest, start a business. The most underrated answer is this: keep it boring. For your first 10,000, safety matters more than return. This isn't the money that's supposed to double. This is the money that lets you sleep. That means keeping it somewhere accessible and stable. A high-yield savings account, a simple insured place where it won't disappear when the market sneezes. Once that foundation is set, then you can think about a second pot of money designed for growth. That's where investing comes in. That's where Tim talks about index funds and long-term compounding and using time to your advantage. But your first 10,000's job is different. It's not there to impress anybody. It's there to catch you when life trips you. The journey to that number teaches you almost everything you need to know. You learn how to live slightly below your means instead of exactly at them. You learn what actually brings you joy and what was just reflex spending. You learn to set a clear target and move toward it, even when progress feels slow. The person who can save 10,000 can save 100,000. The mechanics don't really change, just the scale and the patience. $10,000 isn't just a number in your bank account. It's a line in your life story. On one side of the line, every flat tire, every vet bill, every surprise invoice feels like a crisis. On the other side, those same events become problems. Annoying, sometimes painful, but survivable. On one side, money is something that always happens to you. On the other, it's something you actively shape. If you're staring at a balance right now that looks nothing like 10,000, don't let that discourage you. Everybody who ever hit that number started with a balance that looked small or even negative. You don't have to close the gap today. You just have to start moving in that direction and refuse to stop. Because in the end, the most valuable thing you build on the way to $10,000 isn't the money itself. It's the version of you who knows, with proof, not hope, that you can set a financial goal, stick to it, and change the entire feel of your life. Tonight, move just $20 into a separate first 10K account and promise yourself you won't touch it. That's how this new chapter quietly begins.